Warning, this podcast has stories of real-life events and true crime that happens every day. These stories may contain adult language and graphic or disturbing details not suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
132 in Bush, I've got him at gunpoint.
They're pulling them out.
10-1-1. Advise ready for escape.
Welcome to another episode of War Stories. I'm Tom.
And I'm Chuck.
And we, as you guys know, we record in advance. So sometimes when we talk about things, we're talking about them in the future past.
So weird. In the future past.
This one, when we are recording this, is about the same time that, well, it is literally the day after. So it's Tuesday. It's the day after the most recent episode 274 came out. And you may or may not see 274 in your feed right now.
It's going to get deleted.
We very rarely delete episodes. And it's usually like we have an episode that I took off because the cop that shared it realized this was way early on. He was getting some hot water and he asked us to remove it. We have unreleased. We have not released episodes. We have episodes that we were like, nope, not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Or have to redact things like right in the middle, and you're like,
right. And on that episode, episode 274, for those of you who listen to it, the episode was titled Super Cop, Just Ask Him. And that comes from an old joke that we used to tell. You'd meet a certain kind of a cop and you'd say, oh, he's the best cop in the world. Just ask him.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I did honestly, like, because I don't ever read any of the because I don't deal with any of the posting or anything like that. So when I got that sent to me today, I was reading, I was like, well, I see why you're upset. But
I don't.
It's not like we didn't say anything that wasn't already true or wasn't already out there.
We didn't even repeat it. We just said go look them up.
No. Yeah, that's all we said. And honestly, I don't think we could have been any more respectful. I mean, if you get sent something that is, you ask for a bio on something and you go back through all the transcripts and you're like, I clearly asked for the bio. This is the bio that was sent. And I maybe I messed up or someone else messed up. But the fact of the matter is the wrong bio gets sent in. And through all transcripts, that bio is the same.
That dude was just a douche.
And so if you catfishing your way to get in, then you get in trouble for catfishing. And that's how it looks to us. And we're all investigators. We're all trained investigators, right? We do cop podcasts. We're all cops, or most of us. And then so that happens. And then you're like, well, that's kind of weird. And then they omit something that says, oh, I was getting a hit piece on me. Okay, well, let's look that up. Because now we have the wrong info on this guy. Mm-hmm. He just kind of squirreled his way in. We're like, huh.
Well, regardless about looking stuff up, he did not get a raw deal. He came on. Mm-hmm. He said who he was. We looked him up afterwards. We decided to put a disclaimer on our show. It's our show. And then he got mad that we disclaimed him.
We said the same thing you said. We just went into more detail because we went up a little bit, but still didn't put it out there.
But here's the thing:
your laundry. That's you need to clean up.
We'll see what happens with that episode because you never know. But
well, for right now,
my initial thing was screw him. I took it down initially because it was basically it was more of a headache to leave it up with this guy being the way he was. But if you want to hear more about that, you can go back to Locker Room Live from the weekend of Thanksgiving, and you can hear us talk a lot of shit about people calling us and crying about their episode getting canceled because that is what we talked about for a lot of that episode.
Yeah.
For today's episode, we have a guest. And
we do.
I'm pretty sure that this guest's bio is correct and actually represents the guest we have in the waiting room. So please welcome 100%. Blake as our guest to the show. How are you, Blake?
Doing great. Just laughing over here, enjoying the banter back and forth.
Yeah.
I swear, if we got the wrong bio,
I think I sent you the right one. I'm pretty sure. If not, I'll have my my executive assistant fired.
I
That's right.
specifically
Well, 'cause
asked.
Blake's not trying to
Fire
catfish.
How do you want me to talk about you? Yeah.
All right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Blake, Chuck?
Oh,
Yeah, so Blake Dylan, our producer, he snagged him off of the LinkedIn, I'm assuming, which is a great thing. If you haven't been on LinkedIn, go on LinkedIn and link up with us. He's a coordination director at the Catalyst program. Blake's expertise spans in learning management systems, artificial intelligence, and cryptocurrencies. Between 2011 and 2015, Blake began writing for softrep.com, published over 70 articles on topics such as geopolitical analysis and veterans issues. Wow, that's really cool. Reaching over 42,000 readers. He also managed the social media accounts for the Green Beret Foundation from 2011 to 2014. As a result of one of his articles, College After Special Operations, Blake was invited to deliver a TED Talk X presentation on the challenges of transitioning from special operations to college. Pretty cool. One of his more notable publications in Bitcoin Magazine, titled I'm a former Green Beret, and here's how I would take down Bitcoin, showcases his deep understanding of unconventional warfare, security, and technology, and generated a fair amount of conversation on what appeared to be psychological operations being waged on various cryptocurrency communities. Now, I kind of believe that, you know what I mean? Because there is so much of that crazy shit going on, false flag, fake information shit. You can't even be sure of what you're seeing.
it was it made a lot of sense to me at the time. And to be clear, the editor changed the title of that article. I did not title it that, but it got more clicks. So it, hey, I was like, all right, just roll with it. I understand. But
That's funny.
Yeah, that's what editors.
This is how I would do it. It's like the OJ thing, Tom.
Yeah. Right. Oh
man, that's awesome.
So you are now. So let's go back up. Your background. You have a background in special forces, right? And then you transitioned to writing articles, and you went to college after special forces, and your kind of expertise became the transition out of the military, which I think is a great subject because, correct me if I'm wrong, Blake, but I say for the most part, you can look at a huge chunk of military veterans and go, half of them go to the police department and the other half go into prison.
No, that's
really it would be just as accurate to say half of them go into public safety, firefighting, police, something like that, some sort of service-oriented career.
Some sense of brotherhood.
Lose their way and end up in some form of trouble, whether that's prison or something else. But there is another path.
Yeah.
And you're going to talk to us. Well, first of all, we're going to talk about some of your experiences, but how did you end up in special forces to begin with?
So I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened. And, before 9/11, I was very much of the mind of just like, hey, I'll figure out a way to get into college. I think I only applied to Indiana University at the time. That was like my one school that I was shooting for. And my GPA was not great. I was banking everything on my SAT scores, and that didn't work out quite well either. So like 9/11 happened, and I think I missed the cutoff for getting the FAFSA deadline at the time, and I was not doing great in high school. Put it that way. We'll keep it simple for the sake of this. And
seemed like you were looking for an excuse to go a different direction.
Yeah, I think that's a good way. Yeah, I think I kind of had the recognition that if I would have went to college, I would just ended up wasting my parents' money and my time, and possibly ended up in not good situations. So anyway,
some people aren't ready for it yet.
Yeah.
No.
It did not make sense to me at the time. So I think at some point I just kind of I spent a lot of time reading like Black Hawk Down and Band of Brothers, and watching the movies and the series, and it put me very much in the Ranger mindset and airborne and all that. So I talked to a Army recruiter. wanted a Ranger contract. This was at sometime after 9/11. They didn't have any of those available, but I did well enough on my the ASVAB and some of the other testing that I could apply for the new Special Forces recruit program that they just opened up for the first time since the Vietnam era.
What was that?
So it was it's called the 18 X-ray program, and it was basically a program where as long as you scored high enough on the ASVAB, you could apply to go to infantry basic, and you got a guaranteed spot at airborne school as long as you finish basic, and ultimately a guaranteed spot at selection as long as you make it through the prep course.
So that was the SF contract that they were pumping out around that time.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I came in there, I was like, hey, what do you got available? And they looked at my stuff, and I was already out. I was going back, trying to get back in. And they looked at my stuff and the reenlistment package, and they go, you can go to SF contract. And I was like, that's all you have? They're like, yeah. So that must be exactly what you're talking about, because the way they were explaining is exactly how you just explained it.
Right.
Yep. And at the time there was so I was one of the first classes. Well, I think there was 3 classes before me, but I was the first class that had graduates right out of high school. So I think in my basic training class, there was, I know that there was me and one other guy, my buddy Cody. We were the only 2 from my basic training class to make it directly out of high school. But they ended up raising the age limit up to 21 at some point. So I'm in one of those weird windows where, one of the few to make it through out of high school. So it took me a while to figure out what that all meant. And in hindsight, a
lot. Yeah.
Yeah. There was I think there was a lot of things that I didn't recognize as going to be a challenge in dealing with that at such a young age.
Right.
But
right.
It was a great learning experience, even though, it threw me into the deep end very quickly and taught me how to.
And do you think that going in at such an early age, or going into this SF contract at such a young age, it was actually harder? Because my buddy Kearney had a MARSOC contract and went straight out of, from what he scored inside of in boot camp and everything, and he was already slated to go to School of Infantry for ITB. They ended up just saying, screw it, no, we're going to send you to MARSOC. Obviously went and did all that stuff to become an infantryman, and then they sent him straight to MARSOC training because of all of his stats from boot camp. But he was so young that he ended up getting booted out because he got into a fight. Do you think that caused you, were you at a disadvantage being so young, immaturity or, just bullheadedness or anything like that?
There's definitely a disadvantage. Basically, when I first got to my team, the average age on a team in Special Forces is 25, 26. So I got there when I was 19. My team sergeant was older than my dad. So the sort of banter that I was getting in the first days was pretty heavy, but I was used to all that. But awesome. I think the biggest problem for me was, I remember talking to my wife at the month prior to actually going to group and getting out there, just having this overwhelming sense of dread. I slipped through the cracks. I don't belong there. I'm going to end up having my gear thrown out in the hallway within a matter of weeks. And so I think the whole imposter syndrome concept really sunk in deep at an early, before I even understood what that was. I definitely have a different perspective on an imposter syndrome. So that was really heavy at that time. And I remember after there was one specific instance, we just got done with one of our training trips, called JSETs. I don't even know what JSET stands for anymore. It's been so long, but basically going somewhere and doing some training event and, loading out all your gear. One of the sister teams, a couple of the guys came down the hall and started giving me a hard time about something, just messing with me. But then our senior medic came out of the room and is like, hey, Blake's been on 3 JSETs at this point. So he's kind of in the clear. He's good to go. And it was that moment that I realized, maybe I didn't actually slip through the cracks. Maybe I earned my place over here. So it took a while, and I think that there was a lot of that sense of like, I don't belong here. I just slipped through the cracks, seeped into my psyche for a long time. And it came up in ways that I didn't expect, but, and SEER school really messed me up. I was the war baby there. And in hindsight, I think, so basically the war baby is the youngest war criminal is what they call us. So you're in this POW camp, and anytime they get tired of slapping around the leadership, they bring out the war baby and use the war baby as leverage against the leadership. So they're like, war baby, this is not your fault. This is their fault. And they just start slapping me in front of the leadership to try and.
So you got the shit end of the stick from the very beginning.
Yeah. And that one was funny too. Cause
SEER school sucks, but I didn't know they were going to beat me to get to you.
Yeah. No, like even
that's kind of awesome.
Time, it didn't even register at the time, like what they were doing. Like I thought I was in trouble. Like I was and looking back at it, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Totally.
But at the time, like I'm so young, I'm sleep deprived, I'm delirious, and I think I lost like 25 pounds at this point. But like we started off in the camp, and they were asking who here is 20 years old, and like I still hadn't. My buddy Cody was the next oldest than me, and I still hadn't reached 20 yet. And they all raised their hands, and they start going through the process of deciding who's the youngest and who is going to be the war baby. And they start like figuring this out. And I raise my hand. I'm like, I'm still 19. So like, oh, you are the war baby. Because I knew the pain was going to be much worse.
You needed to come clean with that.
Yeah, that would have been very bad. I would have paid dearly
if
for
they
that
had
one.
Discovered you.
Oh yeah. Oh, it would. And I knew that. I remember thinking that clearly, like this is going to be very ugly. And I think at the time too, there's this, and it's still carried on to the teams, just this nagging sense that like, I'm going to do everything I can to avoid being a liability. And that's always like the deepest fear that kept springing up all the time is like, you're only 19 years old. You're going to a special forces detachment. You're already a liability. So, don't F this up. Do everything you can to not screw this up.
Do you think that's a good headspace to be in because it keeps you on your toes?
Yeah, I think that there's certain situations that definitely kept me on my toes, and it propelled me into places that would not have been possible otherwise. But I think, looking at it in hindsight, it came with a cost.
Sure. Everything does.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think I wouldn't, I guess the easiest way to answer, I wouldn't have changed anything on that path that I've done. It gave me great opportunities to see the world in ways that I would have not have seen it any other opportunity. And then like looking at some of like my buddy Cody, I keep talking about, I still keep in contact with him, and he's now he's working on Sergeant Major in a National Guard unit. And so like, he's advanced on, he stayed in the game. And, there's a number of other guys that were right out of high school, 18 X-rays, did very well with their time in service. And so I think it just comes down to like, there's predispositions towards being able to run that gauntlet and come out better than you went in.
Right.
I think had I stayed in, I think there's good indicators that I would not have done as well as as some of my peers, I guess. That might just be like negative thought patterns in my head, but there was enough instances where I was like, I'm rolling the dice a bit too often in this situation. I'm going to end up.
There's some point where you realize you're pressing your luck too much and you have to cash out.
Yeah. I think I had that sense, especially after the trip to Iraq. Like we went on. What's that? I was
going to say, it sounds like you have really good situational awareness even prior to the military. So I think it's like you're almost foreshadowing what's to come if you continue down a path that you have already been able to witness thus far. So I think it's your body's biological. Hey man, why don't you do this now? You know what I mean?
I think that's a very good read, and I haven't quite heard anyone put it that way, but I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And like I was gonna say, like the trip to Iraq. So our team was over in Samara in 2006, and we were there when the Golden Mosque got blown up in February of 06, and that started the whole sectarian conflict around that area. And it was interesting because, like, we were on many raids. Probably I think the total count was something like 70 to 80 different raids, going into houses and stuff like that. And everywhere we went, like, everyone's immediately like, hands up, don't want to fight. I had one round fired at me from down the road, and we were crossing a street one time, and that was the only round that was ever really fired at me in anger. We had a lot of incoming rocket and mortar fire.
Sure.
But nothing ever landed other than a couple of times getting some splash damage on the house. There's just a lot of instances where, you go into it expecting this could get ugly really quickly, really easily. And
right.
Everything's, hey, we just don't want to fight. Like when the Golden Mosque got blown up, we were expecting, because I had the UAV training, so I flew the Raven while I was over there. So the mosque got blown up, and I sent up the Raven. I was doing overflights and getting some imagery of what was going on, and you could see. And we were only about like 1.5 kilometers, maybe less, away from the actual site of the explosion, and you could hear people chanting in the distance. And like they immediately went on the loudspeaker saying, "Hey, the CIA and the Mossad blew up the mosque," so they were getting them all riled up.
Right.
So we were expecting a fight, and
right.
So we get the overflight, and our team sergeants all spun up, and everyone goes to some defensive positions. I got thrown on the southwest corner of our team house with the minigun truck. So like overlooking the walkway towards us from the mosque. And I was expecting a fight at this point. So, you can hear the chanting and marching in the distance, and then for whatever reason, it gets a little bit closer, and then the crowd just dissipates and disappears. Wow. And nothing ever happens. But from that moment on, all the warfare within like a 20-kilometer radius of Samara, it turned into just bedlam. There was bloodshed all over the place.
Chuck,
so
we've interviewed a lot of people on the show, and plenty of them have been shit magnets. This may be the first time we've ever interviewed someone who's a good luck charm.
Yeah, I mean,
you sound like you were #blessed on your like you're the guy everybody's like, no, we're taking fucking Miles on our crew because like everybody lays down and behaves when he's with us, right? You sound like you have a good luck rabbit's foot up your ass or something.
If I do that, there's another one that comes at a cost, I guess. I haven't quite figured that one out, but that, I don't know. Like, there's, well, here's another interesting story that might kind of correlate. We had, we had one of our, right around the time, I can't remember if it was before or after. I think it was probably after the mosque got blown up. We had reports from one of our contacts in the city. He was like one of our lead sources. And he was saying that there are a number of foreign fighters that were coming into the city. And there was basically a turf battle that was forming between the local gangs and these foreign fighters. And they were basically arguing over who's going to get access to these resources, dealing contraband and stuff like that. So we were up in our team room talking about it with our Iraqi scouts one night, and the thought hit me, and I think at this point I might have been moved into the intel sergeant role, because our team sergeant and our intel sergeant got into a fight one night,
Oh my
and our
God.
intel sergeant got sent packing, and they're like, "Hey, Miles, you." I had gone to the. They called it broken axle. It was like I can't even remember what it is. Basically just like source generation, human resources, or building up human network stuff. So I had been through that, and they're like, "Miles, you're good with this. You know computers. You're going to be the new intel sergeant." I'm like, "All right." It turned out I was a much better intel sergeant than I was an engineering sergeant. I sucked as an engineer. But anyway, that's another story.
Like blowing shit up.
Yeah, I was very good at blowing shit up and visualizing explosions. I was not good at property book management and building things, and that was actually what they needed.
I too am good at visualizing blowing stuff up and not good at asset management.
Yeah,
I cannot.
We would get along very well.
Strange how that happens. Yeah. I am really good at visualizing blowing stuff up. I'm really bad at doing the paperwork it takes to blow stuff up.
That's a pain in the ass. I can tell you that from firsthand experience in the military that there are so many people that are capable of doing the job. It's just the after actions and the maintenance and the logbook keeping and the writing is where they fall short. And I have firsthand had to fix that, getting thrown into like kind of like you did, where you just got thrown into like, hey, by the way, we don't have anybody else for this, but you're congrats on the promotion of 2 ranks, but you don't get paid for it, and you're never going to be recognized as doing it. So.
Well, my favorite is, I mean, never, they say Navy stands for never again volunteer yourself. Sometimes you get voluntold. And I always told people that as far as being assigned stuff to do, I did the police work for free. Like chasing bad guys, you don't have to pay me for that. Driving with the lights and siren on, you don't have to pay me for that. Pointing guns at people, getting in fights, you don't have to pay me for that.
Right.
All the fucking paperwork you got to pay me after I do that shit.
Yeah,
that's what you're paying me for.
Yeah,
100%.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, you're paying me not to arrest somebody for DUI. You're paying me for all the bullshit paperwork I have to fill out after I arrest somebody for DUI.
Right.
That was actually one of the things that I didn't realize was part of the stuff that we had to do is getting all those, like once we roll someone up, all the paperwork that goes along with it.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, it's like I thought this was like a war, but no, there's paperwork.
Geneva Convention.
There's always something.
Well, we're putting a new cover sheet on our TPS reports for
make sure it's updated. Make sure you have the proper one. Yeah.
I mean, think about it though. It's the police department, same thing. I'm sorry. You got in a fight and you sent him to the hospital? Yes. Oh, you need a 249B for that. You need a totally different form. This is if you take him to jail without the hospital. We have a whole different form for that.
A whole form flow. There's always a form flow for it.
There is, and it's tedious. And I see the importance of it, but come on, make it more like streamlined.
Yeah. Yeah.
So streamlined would be great. You served in special forces, and I mean, I could just hear your special forces stories as long as you want to share them. But I just want to know when did. So as we go through your time in the special forces and stuff, when did you realize, like, hey, I gotta learn more stuff, and I gotta have a plan when I get out? Was it while you were in, or did it not happen until you actually got out?
It didn't happen until I got out. I think I had I guess this is another downside of the path that I went. I had an overconfidence in myself to a large degree. Okay. I was like, I'll be able to figure it out when I get out. It'll be fine. I'll figure it out.
I was gonna say it'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
No, kick the can down the road.
It was not fine. I learned
the Army's problem.
Yeah, no, the Army will figure it out for me.
Yes.
No, So like the first job I had, I was able to find when I got out. I was banking everything on an Intel analyst contracting job in the Chicago area. So I was kind of confined based on where my wife was going to school.
Right. Got it.
So I was like, all right, there's a Intel contracting job. I should be good to go with that. And everything was looking good. after I had already decided on separating, and I was working on, the closing, whatever the closing doc, I can't even remember what it's called, but out processing and going through the Legend of Zelda quest to find the candle so you can get to the thing, and all that nonsense.
Sips and taps, dude.
Taps is kind of like the one critical element that led me to where I'm at now in my current role. So that's a whole mess. But anyway, I was banking everything on this intelligence analyst role, and then as like the day was approaching, that fell through, and it's like, all right, now I got to find something else. And the first role that I could find that made sense with where I was going to be was packing boxes at Uline on the warehouse floor.
Oh, geez.
And Waukegan. So
going from special forces to packing boxes, that's a big change.
It was like, I think that contrast did an extra number on me because, a fair amount of pride built up, unfortunately. And then, putting those contrasts together of like, hey, about a year ago, you were leading Iraqi troops in Arabic on combat operations without an interpreter. And now you can't get a leadership role as a warehouse worker because you don't have a college degree. So how's that going for you? And it sent me spiraling. And then at the same time, I had a herniation in my L5S1. And that started getting worse and worse. And so I went to the VA right down the road. And then next thing I know, I'm into Vicodins like candy. And
we're Injury Brothers. That's where mine is. L5S1.
Oh, it's a great spot. Yeah,
I love it. There's nothing in this world. Yeah, there's nothing in this world that can touch it except a really long effing needle.
Yeah. Well, so the good news, the good end of this story, I guess, is that I was able to get a microdiscectomy up in there was a civilian doctor in the Waukegan area. I got a microdiscectomy and went in and walked out the same day, and
nice.
I haven't had problems in that area since. So it was
really,
yeah. I think wow. I was still like 23, 22 at the time, so I think my age probably helped out with the recovery tremendously.
I'm surprised they did it for you.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was the civilian healthcare insurance.
There you go.
That was the only way it would have worked. So
right. Leave it to the VA not to do anything for you.
Yeah, I think they were cool with the Vicodin pathway for me for a while. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that pathway I really learned a good deal about. At least in hindsight, there was a lot of pride that went into how I viewed what I should be doing versus what I thought I was capable of doing, and finding that balance in between. And
we've talked about that on the show a lot of times. Is the mental struggle of going from being in charge of multi-million-dollar equipment, being in charge of men, being in charge of people's lives, being in charge of a tactical operation, being in charge of all these things, being so trusted.
Yeah.
And then when you get out into the real world, that and $4 will get you a cup of coffee.
Yep.
Yeah. That was my biggest, I think the biggest hurdle when I went into law enforcement is that I got trusted at such a young age with explosives, with a multi-million-dollar vehicle, with $1 million radio system that's all like cryptology and all that stuff, and crypto's unloaded in it. You have to have a TS clearance just to even deal with it. Like, it's just all this crazy stuff. You're enamored with all these things, and you have all this trust, and then you go into say something like law enforcement, and you're like, oh, this can be a lot better. It's paramilitary. Right. You get there and they micromanage you and treat you like a child. And you're like, whoa, dude, like I get that. But like I had all this responsibility over here. And now it's like, I'm being second guessed on every single report that I take. And every time I arrest someone, it's like all this extra steps. And you're like, man, I got trusted more with $1 million worth of equipment as opposed to just one thing here. Like it's crazy how
they marine proofed the equipment against you.
Hey, dude. I mean, there's only so much marine proofing you can do, but yeah,
we'll find a way.
You get taught so many things, and then it's like we go into the civilian world, or even like even the paramilitary shit, and they still don't give you the same respect or the same, I guess they look at you a different way. They don't look at you
You're
as,
a piece of shit.
competent.
Let's call
Exactly.
let's call it what it is, right?
Especially if you don't have a degree. You're like, come on, like, what's the
if
fuck?
you could take your military service out into the real world.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the only people that are going to give a rip about your military service in the real world are prior military, right? You talk to, I've watched it happen, right? I've watched it happen for law enforcement. I've watched it happen for firefighters. I've watched it happen for military. I've watched it happen for anybody in the prior service. You tell people what you used to do and they could give a shit, or they ask dumb questions about it. Did you kill anybody?
Yeah.
Right.
It's like the number one question.
Right.
Especially with kids.
But oh god, right. But when you talk into the situation when it comes to, you know, other prior military, other police officers, they will look at you and they will know what you've been through. They know your shared experiences. They know theoretically what you're made of. They might throw out a couple of conversation pieces to kind of heart check you to see what kind of a cop or what kind of a veteran or whatever you were,
or leader.
Just right, you know.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you're going to get some respect, some leeway, right? The rest of the world doesn't give a shit.
Yep.
I mean, I will at least say the organization I work for now, when it's Veterans Day, everybody who works for the company that's a veteran gets the day off. Everybody else got to go work. That's the way
Cool.
they're like, if you're a veteran, you can have the day off. It doesn't cost you anything. But everybody else, fuck you, come to work. I dig that, right? Like I actually wish there were more programs for other public service. You know, like I go to places, they're like, "Are you a veteran?" I'm like, "I'm a retired cop." Some places are like, "Cool, you also get a discount for public safety," and some places are like, "That's better than only."
Yeah,
but again, those are the small segments of society. The Chick-fil-A's that do the table, the special table on Memorial Day or Veterans Day, or the private organizations, they'll do that. I know of organizations that would do veteran points during the testing process. They would give you an advantage by prioritizing your application for being a veteran.
Right.
But other than that, when you get to your job, the guy who's about to tell you what to do does not give a flying fuck how many men you commanded, how much your truck was worth, how much you oversaw. Like, they don't care.
No.
It's a rude awakening.
Yeah. So along those lines, I think my current role at the Catalyst program. So I've been over here for 4 years, and I think one of the most profound realizations I've had on that topic is I started to look at the problem set of the veteran to civilian world problem set as a cultural linguistic problem, to where the veterans speak English, but yet it's a specific dialect of English.
Okay.
The business world also speaks English, but it's a different dialect of English. So if there's no cross-cultural communication bridge between those two parties, you got a veteran coming in that has a wealth of experience in leadership and risk management, project management, consulting, all of these different areas that if they understood the translation, the business leader could also understand it, but there's this gap of communication. So once, like, part of our approach, it's kind of at the core of our curriculum, is teaching these veterans, like, hey, you've been in the military for all these years. You've done, business leadership in specific areas. The military is a business. It's just a specific, specific industry within business. So once, like, and you can see this in every cohort that we have, is there, like, we have senior leaders come through, senior NCOs, and there's, like, I call them light bulb moments, where one of our guest instructors comes in. They've had a military background, but they've also been successful in the specific MBA type discipline. So they're
Right.
talking about like consulting or, economics or finance. And as they're talking, there's like a light bulb moment where one of the veterans is like, oh yeah, I remember doing that exact thing for like, a year and a half in command. And so there's these moments where it starts to click. Like if I start to learn the language and I start to understand specifically what I did in the military that
Right.
a hiring manager or a C-suite, executive is going to find valuable, they can open doors that would have otherwise remained closed. And
Right.
but on the flip side of that too is it's a much easier conversation to have with like these C-suite leaders that like, hey, there's a whole wealth of leadership experience that's coming out of the military right now,
Untapped,
but they're completely untapped because your HR departments have no idea what these people have done or what they're capable of doing.
Yeah.
But we're polishing and then giving them this language understanding so that when they're in front of your HR department, your hiring managers, or even your C-suite leadership, they're able to speak this language and it makes perfect sense to them. So I think once I started seeing the problem set in that light, not only did it make a lot more sense, but it made it less contentious. And I know for me, like when I was at Uline, I've got it somewhere. At one point, I was considering going on a UW unconventional warfare mission and spreading these little laminated placards that say, I made some like ransom note carvings of cut up these things that says leadership comes from experience, not from a college or not from a degree. And I was going to start posting them up all over different bathroom areas. And so like I viewed it as like it was a contentious issue. Like there's this group that doesn't want me to be in a leadership role for reasons X, Y, and Z. But ultimately it comes down to I'm not speaking their language. And they're the ones in charge of the situation. So if I learn the language, I can open doors.
It's not so much as there's not an active person or philosophy keeping you down so much as a misunderstanding. And I will tell you, I just recently hired a vet. She has been both a Marine and an Army soldier, and very, not very common. But when I looked at, and I did all her reference checks, and I looked at her, time in the service, I saw a lot of crossover skills, right? And we talk about, I'm sure you talk about this at and we'll get to your program again. It's the Catalyst program, by the way, for those of you, because we started talking about it a little bit, but you don't know.
Yeah, I'm bouncing around like a bouncer.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay.
So what you're talking about with the Catalyst program is something I noticed, with this latest hiring process too, is that we have a candidate. She's a really good candidate. And she has a lot of transferable skills, right? Those crossovers.
She doesn't know how to articulate it.
She doesn't know she has transferable skills, right?
Yeah.
Or she does know she has transferable skills, but like you're saying, Chuck, she can't articulate it. Like she looks at the job description and she knows it doesn't look hard, but she doesn't know why it doesn't look hard. You ask, what skills do you bring to the table? What experience do you have that's relevant to this position? They can't put it in civilian terms, like you're saying. That makes a lot of sense because I, having had the experience of both worlds now, I can look at her and go, okay, you need to put this, and this, because these are all skills that you possess from doing the jobs you did that are transferable.
Yeah.
And young in my career anyway, I didn't know what transferable skills were. Like I didn't know that you could, but when you start to understand what that concept is, when you start to understand how to articulate that, it almost becomes like this unlocking of your resume where you realize you're shortchanging yourself. But I think to your point too, when you go to certain trainings, when you reach a certain level in the military, for example, somebody goes to OCS, right? Somebody becomes an officer. Much of their education centers on articulation, right? It centers on these kinds of conceptual ideas. So somebody who has served above the line or in a commissioned officer role might understand these things a lot more inherently, but may take for granted that somebody in a non-commissioned role, they're like, oh, they know it too. No, they went to boot camp. They were never taught what a transferable skill is.
Right. They don't know they have it until it's slapped them in their face. And I think that we had a guest on the show a long time ago, and he said something that was very profound. He says, know your worth. Doesn't care if you're in military, law enforcement, whatever your first response you were, if you have to leave the career field, know your worth, know what you're capable of, start jotting that stuff down, start learning how to articulate it, start learning what you did that can be transferable. And I don't think I would have looked at it from that lens. And I just kind of started to prior to going into my MBA. Then I went into my MBA, and I'm currently in it right now. And I see so many things that doing these courses that I'm like, whoa, I've done that. Boom, I can talk on that. And it's so many things. And now I feel like I'm in this school with all these freaking kids because they have no idea what it is to lead someone or do any of these things. And we're talking about them because we're supposed to do them, after our masters, but I've already done most of these things. Right. And you start thinking like, oh shit, everything that I've done up until this point is transferable, and this is how I articulate it. So I think it's unlocking that ability to be able to articulate exactly what you've done in your career up into this point that can be transferable. And I mean, it's unlocking that new language. And when you can do that, you can get into more of those hiring managers' laps and past the HR stuff and past the algorithms.
Well, to your point, so we jumped around a bit, as you said, Blake. You are part of the Catalyst program. And for those of you who don't know, you can find it at thecatalystprogram.org. Now, why don't you, because I've got the website here, but why don't you go ahead and kind of explain to us what the Catalyst program is?
Sure. So the Catalyst program is a veteran transition program that kind of, as we've been talking about, focuses on helping veterans to translate what they did in the military into a language the private sector can both understand and find value in. The way we do that specifically is we've got partnerships with a number of different schools. Right now, we've got Indiana Wesleyan University, Southern Methodist University down in Texas, and we just started a partnership with Notre Dame University. And we build a curriculum. We have our core veteran translation, like an MBA crash course is kind of what I call it. So a veteran MBA crash course taught by other veterans that have been successful in those different MBA type disciplines. And we have the school add in their additional curriculum that they bring their area of expertise and they attach it onto our core curriculum. And the outcome is that the veterans get not only college credits toward an amplified reading of their experience, their joint service transcripts and what they did in the military, because we build up good relationships with these schools, and that's a big emphasis for us is maximizing the amount of credits that get accepted. But the veterans with the experience in the different MBA disciplines, they come in to teach our classes. It runs about anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks long, Monday through Thursday at night.
I'm Daniel Haynes.
And so the guest instructors kind of add that multi-spectrum perspective throughout the course that makes the language translation flow most easily, because all these different veterans that have been successful in their fields, they're coming in, they already speak both sides of the equation. Right. They're the ones teaching the classes to these veterans that have either just gotten out, they're on the verge of retirement, or they've been retired for a number of years. So they're hearing these veterans speaking this language on both sides of the business world and also the veteran language. And so throughout the course of it, you have a number of these light bulb moments where these veterans start to realize, oh yeah, I've done all of these things. I just never actually understood the language and speaking it. So, like I said, there's college credits that come out of it. Our Southern Methodist and Notre Dame cohorts are master's level, and Indiana Wesleyan's a bachelor's level program. So
how many on average are you getting?
Per cohort,
units?
we usually have on average about 15 to 20 candidates per cohort.
No, the units that transfer over.
Oh! You mean like credits?
Yeah.
It depends. Like it depends a lot of time. So the max. So this is something that I've learned that is important. Is the max a school can accept is 90 for an undergraduate, because they have to have at least a minimum of 30 credit hours from their school to award a bachelor's degree. So I never knew that one. That was it's like a Department of Education standard thing that I was like, I wish I had known that beforehand. But we've had a number of, especially we got a lot of special operations, a lot of special forces units that they're outgoing transition units have referral programs going into us. So we've gotten a lot of former SF guys that don't yet have bachelor's degrees going through our program, and they end up with technically they have 130 credit hours built up. Whoa. But they can't obviously transfer all of those. And this is just from years and years of going through different courses and stuff. So
they have to get their hands on you and teach you something.
Yeah. There's that minimum requirement. You must at least go through this specific form to get a degree.
Yeah, but that's pretty cool that you're able to take these warfighters' careers, all their years of leadership courses, things like that, and actually make them transferable over into a bachelor's degree, which I think is freaking amazing, because you spend all this time in the military and you I don't have anything really to show for it, but this allows you to go through your course and have something to show for it and give you that good start to finish your degree in a bachelor's degree. That way you can make that next step into an MBA or in some sort of master's course with whatever your field of study is. And I think that just gives them a big leg up on things, because I got to tell you, trying to do that from the ground floor up and not knowing how many things you have transferable other than what just the basic stuff you get through boot camp, what is ever transferable, which is I don't know, a few units for PE and stuff like that, where you don't have to.
No, I think it's great. And just so you're aware,
audience, awesome. Hell yeah.
Just for full transparency, Blake did not pay us to come on the show and do a commercial for the Catalyst program. No. We thought we wanted to talk to him about his time in the SF, but also one of the things that we are passionate about on this show is afterwards, right?
Yeah, know your worth, dude.
Have something afterwards, right? You are more than your time in the military. You're more than your time as a cop. You're more than the uniform, right? The uniform didn't make you. You made the uniform what it was, right? You either honored it or you disgraced it. And most of the people we talked to on the show have honored it. And Blake did that. And we want to see those people taken care of. So that's, I think, why we have someone like Blake on this show to talk about not only his experiences, but how his experiences have related into his latest venture, which is this Catalyst program. How long has it been around?
So 2016, I think, officially was when Dan, our CEO, Daniel Hance, first started it. I got involved late 2020, September of 2020. And I actually found out about it through the Special Forces Association here in Indiana. Nice. And I read the description of it. I'm like, yeah, that's basically what I was hoping to build at the Green Beret Foundation. So I was like, yeah, let me get on.
You guys kind of dovetailed together.
Yeah. And it actually, so I'm glad you kind of presented it that way. Kind of what you're talking about, like when you get out, a big part of the military service and law enforcement service is what happens when that ends, and where do you go from there?
Right.
And I think
one of the service doesn't stop.
Yeah. Because that burning desire doesn't go away. It just you have to find a way to harness it and focus it in a specific area without catching yourself on fire and everything 100%. Around you that you care about.
Good way to put it.
Seems to be a common issue in our community. Yeah. And so one thing that I don't know when I exactly solidified this concept, but I remember it was probably around when I first started getting into Bitcoin and started looking at that, is what I'm looking at this cryptocurrency Bitcoin space, and this is 2015, so it's still kind of early on. But I'm like, what can I contribute to this? What do I bring to the table that's relevant or interesting? And I was thinking of it from like a Venn diagram, like what skill sets do I have? And that was when I came up with like the unconventional warfare perspective and looking at this.
Okay.
There seemed to be a psychological operations campaign going on to drive a wedge between the Bitcoin community and the Ethereum community, and to divide and conquer it. And so I just kind of came at it from that perspective, and like that's when I wrote that first article. And so thinking about it from that perspective of like what skill sets do I have, from the military? I have this unconventional warfare component, the psychological operations component, technology, and putting all these things together. And that seems to be very effective when I'm talking with other veterans of like, what areas are you passionate about? What can you wake up in the middle of the night and start thinking about without missing a beat? Take those areas, combine them, and find ways to get into where those areas overlap, and you'll find areas that you can be passionate about. And that's definitely what I first started doing in the cryptocurrency stuff, but also now with the Catalyst program, it's been something else that I've done, is finding ways, basically building things that I wish I had access to when I got out, because when I got out, it was definitely
Wild West.
Yeah, it was much, and something I think I've kind of, I call it a black pill, I guess, if you wanted to, but once I noticed it and accepted it, it made a lot more sense of a lot of other things. Is the military does not have a vested interest in veterans realizing that they can do good things on the outside.
No.
And once I remember hearing one of my buddies, my mentors, he's like, do you really think the military, Special Forces Command, wants SF guys to realize that you can do very important, big things in the outside world if you're just, prepared for it? And I'm like, oh shit. Yeah. There's like millions of dollars poured into our training. Right. They don't want us to know that that's valuable on the outside. So
it's probably why there's so many successful like tier one operators like that run major corporations and major businesses, because they have all those transferable skills and they're able to tap into them and, and think for themselves. And it's like, oh shit. It seems like that's I guess a very dangerous type of person. You know what I mean? You have all this knowledge of all this crazy stuff, and you're successful in business. Shit.
Yeah. Well, everybody in the military is in a toxic relationship. We all know that. That toxic relationship is with the military. Yeah. Same thing with cops. If you're a cop,
I mean, best leadership I've ever had is always with
law enforcement. No, I mean in general, right? Like, like you can have a good relationship. I've had a good relationship with supervising officers. I've had a good relationship with my mentors. I've had a good relationship. The best way I've heard it put is, I like persons. I hate people. Right? I can like a person, right? I can get to know an individual, and I can get to like that individual person. Right. But there's no way on God's green earth I will ever like people in general. Right? So anyway, Blake, thanks for coming on. I think it's important. We'd love to have you back to just talk about, SF stories.
Yeah.
But also, we're super happy to have anybody, your buddy who's still serving it. If you want to talk, want to have some of your alumni that are willing to talk about how their transition, we'd love to talk to some of them.
Absolutely.
As well. But we also like to give our guests a chance to dedicate their episode to a fallen brother or sister. And Blake, you have a dedication for us. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. The one name I always go back to is Jeremy Wright. He was first group sergeant. I got killed in Afghanistan in 2005, and we were on our SEER team together. He was the unlucky one that ate the turtle soup that got salmonella in the prison camp. But yeah, he was a beast of a dude. He was
that deliberate?
Yeah, no, we were hungry, man. It was 4 hours
shit.
into it, and I think we only had some pork rinds in a bag we found on the side of the road, and some snake, and some berries. We got to throw in the berries, but yeah, we found a turtle and threw it in my ruck, and we boiled it, and he was brave enough to eat it, but he paid the price and got an early ticket out of the POW camp because he got salmonella from it.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
But yeah, he was a all-American cross-country runner at Wabash College here in Indiana. So we were a couple of Hoosier brothers together. But yes, great dude, and dedicated to him.
Okay, well, rest easy, brother. We've got it from here. And Blake, I think what you're doing is also important. I like it. 100%. I'm glad to hear that you started it and somebody else started it, and you guys both found each other and are working on it together.
Yeah.
How can people find you, and tell us about like what it takes to qualify for it? Real quick.
Sure.
Is it GI Bill eligible? Do you get grants and scholarships?
Yeah. So it's since it's a college program that awards credits, you can use your GI Bill towards it. In most cases, voc rehab is a possibility.
Okay.
Even tuition assistance is available in a lot of situations for people that are still active duty. The easiest way to find me would be on LinkedIn. There's on our website, there's a number of links. If you fill out just the general application, I'll probably be the one that connects with you after the fact. But if anyone's got any questions about the program or even whatever, hit me up on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to find me. And
nice.
I think I covered all the questions. I feel like I missed one though, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's always the way it is. You're going to be done with this. Be like, shit, I should have said such and such.
No worries.
That's all right.
Just where can we reach you?
An email. You send us an email and say you want to come back and talk to us. We'll have you back.
No, I'd love to. I've already got my brain's already starting to spin on a few potential introductions for a good alumni that we can introduce you to.
We're happy to. We've
better stories than I've got. I've got my time out of the military has been far more interesting than the time in, which is a weird. I did not expect, but I got some guys that have some good stories while they were in.
Well, and regardless, I think for us, we talk about this a lot too. We talk to the veterans who never deployed. We talk to cops who have never been in shootings. We've talked to firefight, like this job, right? Protecting human beings, because that's really what it gets down to, right? When you're in the military, when you're a police officer, when you're a fighter, you're protecting human beings from the misery of life being shitty. Whether that's in a foreign country and liberating them from oppressors, or whether that's here liberating them from criminals or whatever, you're still dealing with human misery, and you're still dealing with the same bullshit. But what's important is to keep your eyes on what happens after, and we will ring that bell on this show as many times as we have to, and as many times as it takes for us to say, these are your stories, right? These are the guys who didn't deploy just as much as the guys who did deploy. There is no such thing as a second-class veteran. The second you signed your name onto the blank check that said, I will give up to and including my life for my country, you became, the same as anybody else who signed that same blank check. It just doesn't feel that way sometimes. And sometimes it takes the rest of your buddies to remind you. They're gonna put their arm around you and go, fuck off, dude, we love you. And then they're gonna punch you in the dick and grab you a beer, and that's that's the way this works. So appreciate you, Blake.
Thank you.
And like I said, we'll have you back on. Is there any place else? LinkedIn, the website again, I'll give it out again. Or can you give it out again? It's catalystprogram.org.
Yep, thecatalystprogram.org, and
nice.
LinkedIn and that website is the easiest way to find us and interact with us.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Blake. And Chuck, what do you have for us?
Well, I want to say thank you, Blake, today for coming on. It's a true pleasure. I want a message for everyone else: know your worth. learn how to articulate your life. And then thank you all today for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us on Instagram at war_stories_official and our Facebook at War Stories Podcast. If you're already following, we'd really appreciate if you could share our posts and help spread the word. You can also check the link out in our bio on both platforms to find all of our social media, our media links, and website. Our podcast is available on all major streaming platforms, including YouTube. If you'd like to support us, please head over to our website at www.warstoriesofficial.com. Grab some gear. Do you have a story to tell, or you know someone who does? We're always looking for law enforcement, corrections officers, dispatchers, firefighters, medics, and veterans, but we're also looking for those ER doctors and ER nurses because we know you got some great stories. If you're interested, email us at booking.warstories@gmail.com. Again, that is booking.warstories@gmail.com, and share your story. We'd love to have you on. And if you know someone who'd be a great fit, please send them our way. Thank you for all the support. And stay safe. But also remember to like, hit, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that YouTube mumbo jumbo. And we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah. And if you didn't hear the episode that we pulled, check back later. You might be able to hear it again. You never know.
in a month.
Till our next episode, come home with your shielder on it.